Welcome to the webinar on monitoring the Mountain Valley Pipeline with online mapping. West Virginia Rivers and Trout Unlimited are pleased to provide the West Virginia Water Quality Monitoring and Pipeline Visual Assessment Program volunteers with this webinar on the Mountain Valley Watch, an online interactive map of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. I'm Autumn Crow with West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and I will be moderating this webinar. Jake Lemon with Trout Unlimited is also with us tonight to explain how our monitoring program and Mountain Valley Watch overlap. Mountain Valley Watch, a collaboration of volunteers, nonprofit, and private interests, was developed to allow for citizen oversight of the construction of the Mountain Valley Pipeline and to facilitate the enforcement of environmental protections and regulations during that process. Jason with New River Geographics will be providing an overview of the online mapping tool. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Just as a reminder, if you are viewing this webinar as a group, please be sure to send me everyone's contact information so we can follow up with everyone with the important program updates. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you in an email following the live version. It'll also be available to download and watch from our website. The panelists will be answering questions at the end of the webinar, so you can type your questions into the question chat box on the right-hand side of your screen in the webinar control panel at any time during the presentation. You'll also receive a short survey following the completion of the webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know your previous experience, rate your satisfaction with the webinar, your confidence level in using the maps, and offer any suggestions you have to help us improve the program. And before we get started, I'd like to start out with a quick poll to see how many of you have experience with the Mountain Valley Watch or other online mapping programs. So I'm going to launch the poll. And if you can just take a second to answer the pop-up box that comes up on your screen. Okay, it looks like most of you have answered, so I'll close the poll. And share the results. So it looks like about 40-60 split. 40% have previous experience and almost 60% don't. So Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to add thanks to West Virginia Rivers and to Trout Unlimited for hosting this as well. I think this is a great thing to do. So I'm Jason Shelton. I'm with New River Geographics, and we're part of the collaborative team working on the Mountain Valley Pipeline. The website you see right now, this is there's the URL for it, newrivergeographics.com/MVW. You can also get to it via mountainvalleywatch.com, .org, or .us. And once you get here, then there's a number of things that you can do. You can get into About Us and different options here. Check these out, different gallery things. A few reports that we've done over the last few months that I think are beneficial to go through and read if you don't have the history on those. Pretty decent background of what's been going on since tree felling started last winter, a year ago, 2018, 2017. So looking at the section we're going to look at for the webinar here is the volunteer resources. And one more thing I will say too is in about 10 minutes, my wife, nope, she's actually here now. So the dogs are going to start up and bark for a few seconds, but they should calm down momentarily. This volunteer resources section is where we're going to concentrate, looking at the different options here. So basically the erosion control survey form, which is when you go to that, sorry about that, folks. So you go to that and you get to this open in browser. You can open it in the Survey 123 Field app, either or. And so the open in browser piece brings you to, I'm on my computer, so I'm just going to open in the browser. But so you want to download the Survey 123 form, the Survey 123 app out of the Play Store or the iTunes, and then you can download, when you go to that link that we were just on, you could say open in the Survey 123 app instead of open in browser, and it would download onto your phone or your mobile device that you're using there. So go to so we went to open in browser, and we have that. Another app that's really good, so the app that we have here, it'll allow you to take a picture inside of it when you're in the browser. Let's get that open. And so this add picture section, you can choose to add a file up to 10 megabits, and if you choose your camera, then it'll actually go to the camera and you can take a picture there. The only issue we have with that is that it doesn't actually give us a timestamp and location. So the app that will do that is Solocator, and this is a great field app for just getting out when you're out in the field, whatever you're documenting. It gives you a lat long, the direction you're facing, the elevation, and it's all based on your phone location. So sometimes the accuracy is not great, but it's good enough for what we're trying to do here. So this is the erosion control survey that was developed by Kirk Bowers. He's with the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club. He's a civil engineer, and he gave us the list of items that he wanted to see collected in the field. So we have some inspection instructions here to talk about what it is that you do and when you're out there. And then you can go in and, you can put anonymous, you can put your initials, whatever you want to put for the observer. The date and time are automatically put into the time that you're submitting this survey, so you can change that if you say you went out yesterday and you took pictures around 6, 5, whatever. If you load a picture from your phone, it will find it in the map. When you do it from here, you either need to plug in the lat long or you move the map based on where you are, right? So that's set. The inspection checklist, looking at active construction sites, then you have a number of site conditions, and then a number of different pieces that you look for while you're out in the field. And so one thing that's good for the site here is that if you haven't gone through the training resource that the training class that Kirk Bowers puts on, we have training slides here, and later on, probably by the weekend, we have a set of videos that we've recorded where Kirk's gone through and talked about. It's basically him going through and explaining each of these slides and just having a little more discussion and having someone explain it to you. So those resources are there to see what it is that you need to look for out in the field. I'm going to go down to just show you some different site conditions that we're seeing on this pipeline. So this is Grassy Hill Road down in Franklin County, Virginia. It started off as just they basically had a drainage area that was pretty sizable, and water started to pond up, and when the water ponded up, the weight of the water ended up causing some piping that went through and cut out the side of the bank. And they ended up, it started off as a real small issue, and then it turned into this, and then there's more pictures that I'll show you that have a bunch of rocks on there now, and them just trying to still control it. And it really just boiled down to they had too big of a drainage area for that spot. Silt fences being overwhelmed. This is on Brush Mountain, where this was a big blowout that happened. There's some pretty significant steep slopes up on some of these places, and Brush Mountain's certainly one of them, you can get to, so you can get up there to see the steepness by walking on that fire road up there at the top. And then just the sediment, this actually all goes out into Mill Creek and the Slusher Chapel conservation area. And there's what a Solocator image looks like. So just show you that piece. So once you go through the training, Kirk shows you those different site conditions, different erosion control devices that you'll have out there, and you basically just go through the form and you check what you're seeing. If you've got composite filter or compost filter socks, and there's issues there. If there's issues with construction entrances, there's certain regulations, like they need to be 50 feet by 12 feet. So just different things that you're going to observe out in the field. Add your notes. You add images that you need. You also have the training materials in the app itself as far as the slides go if you need to refer to what different items are. And then you hit submit. And when you hit submit, then we get pinged with an email that says you had a submission, and then we go into our data and we get to it from a different way, but this is basically the data that's been submitted from the different citizens around the area. So when you get into we can see the different images that have been submitted, and then what we can do from here is generate a report and send it to DEQ based on what it is that we're seeing out there in the field. So this is called an operations dashboard, and you're seeing two different surveys in here. The erosion control surveys are the form that Kirk developed. We had an earlier version of the form that was based on the Trout Unlimited visual assessment, and some folks just kept using that form. So we haven't taken both of them down, but we also haven't combined them yet, which we're in the process of doing to sort of simplify this dashboard view. So let me get to another one that's got some images. Yeah, here we go. So you can see this was up around Brick Church Road, and they had a really wild area up there where they ended up having to stack up pallets and wood and a lot of stuff to try and stop it, and it just never was. It was just always blowing out like this and causing a lot of buildup. Okay, so let's go back over here. So that's the erosion control survey form, and you get to that just from going to that link there. If anybody has any questions about that, we also publish out from time to time locations where we're going to do in-person trainings. And like I said on this training slide, the videos from Kirk will be going up here this weekend, so check that out too when you get a chance. Another app that we have is the aerial image app, and this is a piloted flight. A fella who lives in Lexington flies the route usually once a month for us, but sometimes more if there's a big storm that happened. He flew after the 2 hurricanes that we had. So we've got different dates of the flights. And then when you get into those, I don't have the April 21st one set up yet, but we'll have that set soon. It'll look like this March one. On these tabs here, so you're in the flight here, on these tabs are the mile markers. So if you know where your property is, what mile marker it is, you can zoom to that. If you know an area that you would like to monitor or help a friend monitor or help a landowner monitor, then this can get you to the images you need to see quickly. And so you have a map on this side, and that point right there is the location that this image was taken. And so the reason you see that so this is facing north, right? The map it's got the north up to the top. And so you see this image needs to rotate right there. So it's basically how the direction from the previous through this one to the next one, and that angle is how that picture came out. So that's just explaining the discrepancy you see in the way that it's pointing. So a map with the point showing the location of this picture, the centroid of the location of that picture, and then information about that image, when it was taken, time, lat long, and then a link to a higher resolution image to download a higher res if you need to. So some of the things that we've seen with this is that same Grassy Hill Road area. And if we back out, when you look at a drainage area that is like that, and it's getting, the issue is not that the drainage area is that big. The issue is that it comes that close to the creek and that you had a ponding situation that happened right there that caused the excess water weight that contributed to that piping. So you can see from that view, the rock, the riprap that they threw down there. So these are pretty sizable rocks they got in there to keep that in place, and then that's just filtering down. You can see a composite filter sock across the creek right there. I know that because we have a ground image showing that as well, but you could kind of see that compost filter sock sitting there in the water. So it's interesting too. So that section right there, this image was taken in September. So you have that section right there that's starting to have more failure. And we go to, this is the April 21st flight of this year, and you've had a much larger section actually be carved out of that. So you're getting a lot of shrinkage and collapsing of sediment and these banks. You're losing some pretty significant banks down in Franklin County. And they did have a significant amount of rain this year, but really the thing that took us over the record was one storm. It's not like it's out of the ordinary to get heavy downpours in Appalachia. So that's an aerial image app, and that can take you, some of these are, most all of them are from Franklin County to Peters Mountain. This January 3rd flight is West Virginia, from Peters Mountain up to, it's past Summers. I think it went 4 counties in he went 4 counties in West Virginia on that flight. But the rest of them, and then these two, the March and the April flight here are both all of Virginia, from Pittsylvania County up to Giles. So check those out. A lot of good information in there, good images. Some other things we're doing, so we take the images that we get from there and we go through and we work on, we use this is Drone Deploy, and we have a license with them to do some processing for us. So what it does, the software actually, it'll build an orthomosaic. So it stitches we do about 50 images at a time, and it stitches those images together. So we can have a ortho mosaic of the route, try and get the entire route. I think the neat thing about this is that we get a few different options as far as what to export. So it creates an orthomosaic. We can look at plant health, and obviously it's just a big scar. But I think the good thing about this is if we can continue flights as they're going through restoration, we can point out the areas that they're not doing very well in, and that we need to get more seed or whatever it is we need to do for that area to help get the ground health back to what it needs to be. Also has an elevation raster that we get, and then this is a 3D model view of it. And it also, I think some of the things you'll see when you, if you go through and look at these and compare them to maybe wetland maps, you'll see that they're really wrong in a lot of places. Like all of this should be wetland. All of this should be wetland. And there's just a lot of areas along the creek that really just had it was defined on some mapping system somewhere that it was a wetland, or that it wasn't a wetland, but it actually is. So that's the point I'm getting at. So this is the fun stuff I like. I'll not get too lost in that. Another section we have here are the erosion and sediment control plans. And so Kirk goes through these as well and talks about the alignment sheets. Go in here and you can click on a mile marker. It's every half mile they have these. And so these alignment sheets tell you what type of erosion sediment control device they need to have in the different areas along the route. You can see what they are down here. You've got the different compost filter socks here. When you come up, you can see there's a 12-inch, there's an 18. That's probably a 24 there. Is that what that? Oh no, that's super silt fence. That green right there, that's super silt fence. So then when you're out in the field and you go, you can come back and verify that what you saw out in the field is what they're actually supposed to have. And for the most part, we're seeing that what they're having to do is actually beef up the erosion sediment control devices, because they don't have enough of them in place, breaking down the drainage areas to small enough areas. It's really a little wild when you're up there on some of those steep slopes. So this will get you to any of the erosion sediment control plans. We've georeferenced some of them. We don't have them all georeferenced, but the goal is to get those where they drop in as a layer as well, and you can see them lined up on the map along with the pipeline. As far as the route information goes, there's the mile marker, the center line of the pipe. This is the temporary workspace and additional temporary workspaces and laydown yards. So just different pieces. These are the access roads coming in. And this was, we got this layer, the pipeline layer from Roanoke County, actually. Couldn't find it anywhere in its complete form, and they gave us their copy, so. Let's see. Okay, let's go over to, so we've looked at the data dashboard a little bit. There's over in the science section. So we've done these three right here. Over in the science section, we have the data dashboard that we looked at a little earlier. So if you wanted to go explore data, this is set up so that as you zoom out, the points concentrate and become a brighter cluster of points. So it's just telling you that there's more than 20 features there when you get the bright dots like that and you're zoomed out. So when you zoom in, you can see what's going on. This is that one area. So they had some silt fence up and some filter socks down there. And it was just time after time. So it's a neat thing to explore. You can also change the date ranges if you wanted to search for, maybe in a certain month, or look around the hurricanes. Different buttons to check the last 24 hours, last week, last 28 days. So you can do a little bit in here to search around if you want to change. If you want to actually see the imagery behind it, you can change the base map. Turn on layers. That's the legend. You can create a bookmark and then search for a place. So, and this is just off of a World Geocoder. You can also look at them this way. It'll zoom to them. And you click on them there. This was an analysis of precipitation along the Mountain Valley Pipeline right away by Tom Adams. So this is definitely worth a read. It's got a lot of good information. Just basically talks about how any of when you break the rainfall events down to the individual pieces, they weren't as overwhelming as what everybody wanted, or what MVP claims, at least. We do drone flights as well. The drone flights tend to be smaller just because we have limitations on flight times, and with each battery we can get about 15 minutes. So that usually gets us about a half-mile coverage total, maybe a little more, depending on wind and what all we've got out there. And then we go through and we process those in drone deploy and get the same piece where you get an orthomosaic that then we can throw into a 3D application to see. See how it's doing. Another piece that we're looking into is the distance to the creeks. They're supposed to have a 50-foot not working in or disturbing within 50 feet of the stream. So that's another thing that should be checked. A lot of times what we're seeing is on these, you have these right-of-way diversions, and they usually go down, they've started digging these little tiny retention ponds that are, it's not even a pond, it's just basically the bucket taking a big scoop and just making an area to hold water for a little bit. And so when it's in the real thick clay soils, it tends to not drain very well. It's clay doesn't drain. So once those holes get filled with water, then you've just got overflow that happens on every successive rain. So you can see it, certainly right here. We've had some blowout coming from that one. Looks like you've got some right there. Some of these are also, old fire roads, so wouldn't be considered. But when you're down on the ground and you start seeing trails, that usually is indicative of sediment having left there at some point. Looks like that's had some issues. And so another piece is all this timber, in a lot of places they went through and they just stacked the timber up on the side. And so that gets into the forest fragmentation pieces. And here it's not as bad as some spots I've seen it, where At least here there's some gaps where the wildlife could get through. In some spots, like on Brush Mountain, there's an entire, slope that is blocked off now, or a couple of slopes, and so that gets into the forest fragmentation piece, and wildlife being able to move across, and it can be pretty impactful. Let's go to, we've also got a 3D map. Let's see which one comes up when I click here. Oh, that's the orthomosaic. Okay. There's a geologic map that we'll be putting up there as well, and this was part of my master's work in Giles. And we were one of the folks putting in a bid for the Deep Underground Science and Engineering Lab that was going to study neutrinos 7,000 feet under this mountain here. And so we did, the state geologist made these cross sections, and we put them in. And the interesting thing is the pipeline actually cuts like right across it in several spots and then comes over the mountain here. So it's kind of neat to have, it's not neat, but it's interesting to have the pipeline end up being on a place where we have some pretty interesting cross sections showing how the karst layers actually connect underground. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about that we feel like needs a little more study and needs some more attention as far as research goes, and that's understanding the connection of karst and karst, communities that sit on karst, because you can really be connected for miles and miles and miles away and not even realize it, just because of that underground system. So another piece with the science section of the website, what we're trying to do here is just educate folks more. So we want to have things like a watershed map. So when you see, there's the route from upper West Virginia down to Pittsylvania County, and you see what watersheds you're actually impacting. So it's not much that we get into the Chesapeake Bay, but we certainly hit the Albemarle. The Chesapeake is just because of that small section right there. And that's coming down Spruce Run Mountain and then over on Craig Creek Road and then back up Brush Mountain there. But it's neat to see your impact downstream, and to actually think about that, we're impacting the folks in the Outer Banks and in the Chesapeake Bay. And when you get down to Roanoke, we've got the Spring Hollow Reservoir that sits right here. And so that's pretty close as far as the pipeline route. Now, they haven't constructed in this part yet. They've only done the tree felling, except for a little section right here. So they're going to be getting into that this year. And I think when we actually get into that route of things and see they're getting basically into the most complex geology that they're going to hit. They've got the perched aquifer up on Bent Mountain that they've got to go through, that is the only water source for that community. And then you have a ton of karst through Giles that hasn't been constructed yet. So those two areas are going to see some significant impacts, I think, this spring and summer. So let's go back over here. We're developing this where we're exploring different geohazards. That's probably the wrong label for it. This is specifically for the casting study, which was a karst study. but we've also been working on some identifications of different geohazards, and that has to do with also, it's not just it's also getting into slope stability. So one of the thoughts is that we take LiDAR and we fly gridded patterns perpendicular to the route along the ridges and mountains that it's crossing, and use that LiDAR data to search for the starts of landslides, because the bare earth return should give us a real detailed view of the ground topography, and you can actually see those slips starting to form early on. There's some other folks that have done different research, and so that's kind of a cool piece there that we want to contribute to. And then this geologic map here, this will just get you the little understanding of what surface rock layers that are seen as you go along the pipeline route. And we've got both West Virginia and Virginia for the geology layers. These pieces, these different items here are different geohazards. That's the part that I was talking about previously, where we went through and identified specific mileposts and what condition they might encounter there. For us over here, it was the Little Stony Creek. So I think, go back one more. Nope. The last thing I would say is just go through and check out the In the News pieces and see the different items that have been put out there by the folks who've been doing a lot of hard work on this. And I think this is probably one of the funniest ones. But I think I would agree with one of the landowners who said I'm proud to be part of that brigade, because it's definitely a good brigade. So with that, Autumn, I think I'm done with this part. If we can open it up for questions.
Real quick before we jump into questions, this is Jake Lemon. Thanks, Jason. That was great. Jake Lemon with TU here. I just wanted to kind of provide some information and clarify how the program that TU and West Virginia Rivers has been implementing over the past few years works with Mountain Valley Watch. I suspect there are folks out here on the call who have either been through one of our full-day water quality monitoring trainings or attended one of our visual assessment webinars. And so just wanted to clarify kind of how some of the guidance that we provided there jives with the resources and the info that Jason shared. One thing is that, just to let you know, is that when we receive reports of issues along the Mountain Valley pipeline, we share those with the Mountain Valley Watch and vice versa. So we keep each other up to date on any reports that we're receiving or submitting to agencies. So when it comes to the reporting form that Jason shared, its design is a little bit different from the visual assessment form and protocols that we've developed. It's a little bit, basically our visual assessment protocols are a little bit more basic, a little bit more focused on identifying failed erosion controls and evidence of impacts to the streams, whereas the erosion control survey program that Mountain Valley Watch has developed, it does include those things, but gets more into ensuring that the erosion controls comply with regulations and with erosion control plans and that sort of thing. So if you're going to use that form, I definitely suggest that you either attend one of Kirk's trainings or at least review the training resources that Jason shared on the website. So if you're reporting issues along the Mountain Valley pipeline, you can still email, if you're one of our current volunteers that have been trained by West Virginia Rivers and or TU, you're still certainly welcome to email Autumn and I as you identify issues with your photos and whatnot, but you can also use the forms that Mountain Valley Watch has put out there, and we'll make sure that that information, you know, passes from one organization to the other. Generally, for issues that are reported in Virginia, Mountain Valley Watch has been reporting those to DEQ, while issues that are identified in West Virginia to you in West Virginia Rivers takes the lead on getting those to DEP. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I provided a little clarification on that before we open it up for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. That's great.
Okay, so we'll open it up for questions now. You can, you have a couple options for sending questions. You can type your questions into the text box on the questions tab. You also have the option to raise your hand if you look beside your name in the attendees tab on the control panel. You can raise your hand, so if you want to ask a question verbally, I can unmute you if your hand is raised. So we do have a question in the chat box, and that question is, do you need Wi-Fi or cell coverage to use the Survey 123 app in the field?
Great question. So the when you go through, what I would recommend is going into your phone and setting all that up when you have a Wi-Fi connection, so that you can get the form downloaded and everything. And then when you go out in the field and you've got it on your phone, you've got the form on your phone. You go to open the Survey 123 app. One of the options will be you can send, or you can send later when you get back to Wi-Fi. And it'll put it in the outbox, and then when you get back and connect to Wi-Fi, it'll automatically send it.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need
a couple options there with that,
or Wi-Fi. Your phone is communicating, you know, directly to satellites that are geolocating your position. So you can be in an area with no service usually, and it will still the GIS portion will still work. Like Jason said, you just have to upload your data once you get back in the service.
Yep.
So I have been in some areas where I'm in like a really steep, narrow valley or ravine where I haven't gotten very good, very accurate geographic coordinates, but generally it works pretty well.
Okay, thanks guys. And another question, how can I use the aerial imagery app? Is there a reporting function?
There's not a reporting function in the app itself. So when you go through and you find an image that you would, let me just bounce over to that real quick. If we're going through and say I see something on this image here, what I would typically do is open, this is the low resolution version that's displaying here, and this is a higher resolution here if you needed to zoom in. Typically the lower resolution is enough to be able to submit to us. Really, I use the high res if I need to zoom in a little bit more and see if it gives me any more detail. So you open that, when we open it, or save it, right? You can also right click right from that point and just say save image as, save it to your computer, and then go over to the training form and load it up here. And then you can also fill out the form with the check boxes that you see issues on.
Thanks, Jason. I don't see any more questions. I don't see any hands raised, so anyone that has a question, now is the time to ask. Or Jason just did such a good job of covering everything that you guys are all experts on this Mountain Valley Watch portal. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Jake, for the information you provided this evening. Please remember to fill out your evaluations that you get after we close the webinar. You'll also get an evaluation and a follow-up email with the recording of the webinar. And like I said, we will be posting the webinar recording on our websites. So thank you all for your attention this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Autumn. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.